You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Good day, everyone. This is Carlton here from A Life in Ruins podcast. Just so you guys are aware that this is our celebratory episode 100 for A Life in Ruins podcast. The episode that you are listening to or about to listen to was recorded live on Saturday, March 12th. We're planning on doing more live shows in the future. Please support Ukraine in any way, shape, or form. We have some links and resources down in the episode description. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to our first live show celebrating the 100th episode of A Life in Ruins podcast, where we investigate the careers of those living a life in ruins. I'm your host, Carlton Gover, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Connor Johnnon and David Howe.
On this episode, we are very excited to have Simone on here. We were hoping to have a different celebration than to do something different and to do something different for our live show, but I think this is the perfect opportunity to have this conversation and to celebrate us also getting to 100 podcast episodes.
However, due to the recent invasion of Ukraine by Putin's Russia, we wanted to use our platform to support the Ukrainian people. So we're here with Simon.
Yeah. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It sounds like... there we go.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, thank you for letting me be here.
Absolutely. So for our audience that's listening live right now, you are able to ask questions, say something in the chat box. So as we're going on through this interview, feel free to ask questions to us and Simon, and we will field them as we get them. So just starting off, dude, like, how are you doing?
Well, comparatively well. You know, I'm safe, I'm okay. So I believe that's more than enough for now.
Right. Excellent, dude. And how? Oh, just go ahead, David.
Where exactly are you located currently in the country?
Right now, I just entered Italy and just entered the airport in Milano. Before that, I used to be in Kyiv and then on the western part of Ukraine in Lviv for a few days. And now I'm trying to go back to my university and my research.
Okay.
I mean, so you had to cross... I mean, you started off in Kyiv on February 24th, got to leave, and then you had to cross the border into Poland and then take a flight to Italy.
Yeah, that's it.
And this took about like 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah, that's not like I spent 2 weeks to do that. Yeah, we just woke up at February 24, and you remember the location of my home in Kyiv. It's right near the airport on the one hand and the military base on the other hand. So that's not the best place to be located when the war starts.
Yeah.
So a few days we spent to move the whole family, all my relatives, to some place near Kyiv to be sure they are safe. And then we did the same with the school I used to work with. We had already rented the base near Lviv in the western part of Ukraine, so we just did something to arrange the study there with the online, with everything to be sure that school can work. And when this was done, I just started to think of how can I go back to university. So I crossed the border and then I crossed almost the whole Poland and just entered Italy.
That's bonkers.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, kind of like setting this up, because this whole war didn't happen out of nowhere. I mean, there's been like 2 decades, even like 3 decades of kind of build up to this. And so for like a lot of our audience, like I didn't know when I showed up to meet you guys, really the differences between Ukrainians and Russians, because that's just something we're not taught over here. So can you, for our audience, explain like what are the differences between Russians and Ukrainians culturally, linguistically? Like, why is this important?
Basically, the simplest way for now is the historical reasons and language stuff. Yeah, so there's different languages, and basically there's different ethnics and different ethnoses and different nations, and we know this consciously since the late medieval age, I believe. So as soon as Ukrainians start to create some kind of systems after the Golden Horde and the mass Mongols did on the Ukrainian land. We considered Ukrainians as something that is intended to be separate and independent. And then when the most part of Ukrainian territories were under Russian Empire, we still thought that Ukrainians are independent because of ethnicity, because of language, because of literature and some meta-narrative of the Ukrainian independent project. And since the beginning of 19th century, the idea of Ukraine as a more or less independent nation already appeared. So we tried to do this when Russian Empire turned to be USSR, but failed because of the difficult political processes there. And then we had a new attempt, which appeared to be successful in 1991, and Soviet Union crashed. Yeah, but basically we still had a lot of narratives of post-Soviet fraternity and some kind of common destiny of Russians and Ukrainians, and a lot of ideas like this. And in Russia, from some point, there were a huge increase in the intensity of these ideas. So on some point, they just decided that as we are the close nations and as we are kind of brothers, generally it would be better if we create one governmental system. Yeah, so it's simply better to invade us. It's long story short. But basically, since 1991, Ukraine is an independent country with independent law, independent constitution, and with the political institutions that are supposed to prove its sovereignty and independency.
Gotcha. So like even prior to the Soviet Union, Ukraine had a history of being independent, being ethnically and linguistically different. And so kind of this myth of one people is from the post-Soviet narrative.
Yeah, there's no such thing as the fraternity of the nations at all, in fact, yeah, and it's ridiculous to say that people from Kazakhstan and people from Belarus and people from Ukraine is just one crowd of Soviet people. Yeah, now it's simply ridiculous. And we knew it for long ago, but this is, this sounds like some imperial stuff, but
yeah,
it's impossible in 20th century, I believe, to consider empire as something valid.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask real quick. So you got this independence in 1991, but there's always been this kind of Russian influence, Russian attempt to infiltrate the government. There's always been something there to try to kind of get Ukraine back.
We used to have political discussions in Ukraine, inside of Ukraine, what is the right vector for the Ukrainian development. So at some point, our former president invented some kind of multivectorality, which means that we are communicating with Europe in terms of Euro integration, but still trying to communicate with Russia and be good neighbors with them. And since 2014, Ukrainians declared their will to integrate in European Union, and since then this war on the east of Ukraine started, basically. So as more we try to integrate with the West, the more impacts of Russian invasion we have. That's
in the States, we're kind of taught larger aspects of history, less so than small, finite details of, Ukrainian Russian history. And you mentioned the Golden Horde. We're aware of the Kievan Rus. So is it at that point where Ukraine and Russia kind of split linguistically, or what kind of goes on there?
That's first of all, that's kind of complicated question, and this kind of complicated question to me as not a linguistic. But before the Mongol invasion, we had a kind of governmental entity or civil entity called Kyiv Rus, which is the one country of all Slavic people. And then we had two languages there, which is the Old Slavic language and the Church language used in sacral stuff. And two of these languages evolution differently, and then in some proportion became a basement for the Russian and for Ukrainian language. The modern Ukrainian language, as we know it, appears in 19th century in writing at least. And it is not even considered at the beginning of the century as something independent. But then it appears that we have our own literature on this language. And this literature is already infected by the national idea and the national project of Ukrainians. So that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I did not know that.
You brought up like two critical pieces of history, kind of talking about Ukraine's neutrality. And then like there was a brief period in like 2004 under the Yushchenko presidency where, he was about to sign the EU agreement and then he just kind of did an absolute psych. And then you have the Orange Revolution that takes place in Ukraine of like young people rising up and saying, no, we don't want to be close to Russia anymore. We wanted to be part of the EU. And this is followed by 10 years later, and with the Revolution of Dignity or the Maidan Revolution in 2014.
Yeah, that's more or less slightly different stuff. Like Orange Revolution was the revolution caused by presidency election in Ukraine. There were two candidates, one like pro-European, which is Yushchenko, and another is pro-Russian, which is Yanukovych. And Ukrainians considered that this election was calculated wrong when Yanukovych won in the first turn of this election. So people just came to the streets and pressed the government to provide another election. And then when Yushchenko started to be a president, then on another election, everything came back and Yanukovych became a legal president in 2009, I believe. And after that, when he refused to sign the agreement of Euro integration, some students in Kyiv came to protest that on our central square, which is Maidan Nezalezhnosti, which is the square of independency, and they were beaten by the governmental forces, which basically caused this process of revolution of dignity and street fights in Kyiv, and then changing the president again. And then this guy, Viktor Yanukovych, just left Ukraine in a secret way, running to Russia, and lived for some time in Rostov or somewhere there.
And he's still out and on the run essentially, right, as an outlaw. And that's
and he just appeared a few weeks ago with some funny declarations and advices to Ukrainian politics what to do in terms of Russian invasion, which is obviously an absurd one. That's it.
It just seems like there's always this, like you're saying, this question between where does Ukraine fall? Is it part of Russia? Is it part of Europe? And there's this battle to take it either direction at this point. I mean, and I know this is a big question to ask, but is there any really good solution besides Ukrainian independence and making their own choices?
Basically, we have a lot of international agreement that simply should protect our choices and our sovereignty. I believe that's not really what you're asking about, but in terms of simple logic and of history, Ukraine is rather not Russia than Russia because of the long institute of democracy, long living democratic institutes that really established in some primitive form, but are established in Ukraine since maybe 15th century or the beginning of 16th century. And then our constant attempts to become the more and more autonomous structure. They beginning basically of Ukrainian-Russian relations after the Golden Horde was the agreement of Ukrainian Cossacks and Russians to create a military alliance against Poland. But this military alliance appeared to be a colonization, in fact. So the idea of this Ukrainian sovereignty really falls back to 17th century. And we really have different institutes like Tsar in Russia against more or less democratic election of hetman in Cossacks, for Cossacks in Zaporizhia. So, yeah, that's a lot of difference.
Gotcha. So also something that's been mentioned on the news a lot, like Putin claims that he's trying to protect Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Now, are Ukrainians that speak Russian, are they culturally Russian, or is it just that's the language they know?
That's the language thing. This is very manipulative stuff because the most popular and the lingua franca of Soviet Union was Russian. So any people on post-Soviet space basically knows Russian, or used to know Russian, or his parents knew Russian. So anyway, Russian language is here, and we can't avoid the fact that more than 70% of Ukrainians know Russian, but that doesn't mean they aren't Ukrainians, and this is definitely not about their protection. That's like, we're not killing people on the street because they speak Russian.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, Yeah. So can you tell us about the Orange Revolution? Because that was pretty recent, but I don't think a lot of Americans paid too much attention in terms of as to what's going on now.
The orange one, you mean the orange one of 2004? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I was kind of little boy back there, but the general idea is, this is very simple. People considered that the calculation of the president election was wrong. So they just came on the street and with a really peaceful and calm protest declared that they want this election to be redone and recalculated. And after a calculation, it appeared that the calculation really was wrong and the president should be an allegation to the president. That's it.
Okay. And then later on, we had you guys had the Revolution of Dignity and the Maiden Revolution. Can you briefly explain that?
Yeah, that's the more revolutionary stuff, because then kids, students really were beaten. Yeah, and that was like something that happens in Russia when people go to the protest and some guy with weapon simply beats them and are trying to arrest them and everything. And when these hundreds of students, maybe a little bit more, were just thrown out of their protest, a lot of people came to protect their right to protest. That's it. And as soon as government increased their pressure on the people simply increased their pressure on the government. And finally, we came to the point when Ukrainians declared that they don't want to be ruled, to be followed by the president, who is definitely pro-Russian and who or gives the order to power, to the military forces to kill people and to beat people. So we simply declare that we want to change the president.
Gotcha. Okay.
Excellent. And for those that are listening, the recorded episode, we're going to go ahead and take a break. This has been segment 1 with Life in Ruins. We're here with Simon talking about the war in Ukraine. Welcome back to segment 2 of episode 100 of Life in Ruins podcast. We're still here with Simon. He hasn't left yet. None of us have left. Simon, so we have a question from the audience. Matt is asking, what was going on right before the invasion? Were there groups in certain regions who wanted independence from Ukraine, such as the Donetsk and
Nothing like this. You know that the last 8 years we have the war in these regions. But basically, this appeared to be a very cold war now. We have the border between these republics, so-called republics, and we have the military forces on the one side and on another side. That's it. The border is not moving. Some fire sometimes happens, but no kind of big movement in any side. And we just started to notice that Russia appears to transport their military forces to Ukrainian border, all across the border. That's it. There were no any civilian actions or any kind of terrorism, genocide from Ukrainian side. Basically nothing happened. What really happened is our president and basically all Ukrainians just started to insist on the quick procedure of entering NATO. That's it. And I believe that this message was more or less stressful for Russian government, for Putin personally, because it is kind of going to be dangerous for them to escalate NATO to the east.
Carlton, did you have one?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, everyone. These are one of those moments that we edit out in post-production where there's that awkward silence while we're trying to figure out the next question. So you're seeing this live. Kind of leading into this. So, I mean, like, what was interesting, I mean, not necessarily interesting, but, you know, leading up to the invasion, like the United States intelligence services were like blaring warnings, like this is going to be happening. There are going to be these false flag operations. Like, leading up to it, Simon, did you actually think Russia was going to invade, or did you think it was just because more of Putin kind of just strutting his chest and nothing was actually going to happen?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Like, you know, I'm not waking up with the idea, well, maybe the war will start tomorrow. And like, okay, so I'm going to go and eat some crepes. No, that's not like this. I believe all Ukrainians, or maybe all citizens of Kyiv, knew by the 21st of February where the closest shelter is located, what they need to take in their pockets, and most of us had their bags, like the extreme bags you need to take from home if something starts. Yeah, so that's it. But obviously, most of us just woke up at 21st from the news or from some noisy sounds on the streets and tried to provide their safety as soon as it is possible. Something like that. So that's not like anybody is ready, but we did something to be prepared.
Yeah.
Had it ever come this close before? Did it ever feel like this could have happened in the past?
Not for Kyiv. I have kind of personal experience with Crimea because the parents of my mother are from Simferopol, from Crimea. And when they simply saw these guys on the street that are supposed to be Russian, but without any flag, obviously, because Russians they using the non-flag system, so they just take their bags and left Crimea almost immediately, like in a month. Everything was sold or taken away there. And we already knew that this is possible, and we should be somehow prepared to that, or to at least do something.
Yeah.
Kind of, I mean, just looking at holistically, like I worked with you and the new archaeological school in Zaporizhia, but we also worked in Zavalia with the Odessa group. You got to take me to Kyiv and show me your home and the home city. Like, how are all your colleagues doing? Because they're all now in major population centers that are pinnacle points of this ongoing conflict.
Yeah, the worst is Kharkiv, obviously, and Kyiv in some terms. So those of us who were in Kharkiv, at least they are really scared. it makes, for some of them, the flats are crashed. Yeah, their lives are crashed. They don't have a place to work. With my relatives and with New York Archaeological School, with more or less anybody I know in person, everything is okay. And they are safe. They manage to leave the dangerous places. Those that are in Zaporizhia, they just working to make Zaporizhia prepared when Russian will came there. I don't see any scenario in which the entry in Zaporizhia will be successful for Russians, because it's incredibly hard. But in general, most of archaeologists and my relatives are safe, but a lot of people already lost their homes and relatives and their family and everything.
Yeah.
Hey, we have another question from the audience. This is from Matthew Lowry. So he's asking, what are your concerns for like the cultural material and cultural sites during the invasion? Are they afforded any sort of protections, or is it kind of an afterthought?
I think that the protection is almost impossible. There's like two kind of threats to cultural sites. The first one is the shelling and missile attacks and bombs and everything, and there's nothing we can do with this. So I already know like 5 or 6 sites that are destroyed from different periods of Ukrainian history and prehistory, and this number will be higher and higher, and our Ministry of Culture simply at least started to record this and open the portal and everybody can share the fixation of this stress. The other kind is the our attempt to protect the sites from being robbed or from being destroyed by people by hands, and this is happening with those sites that has been protected before. Like friends of mine who work in rock art site near Melitopol, so now it's the occupied territory. There's a national reserve in there, and the workers of that reserve simply organized to provide the basic protection to the site. That's the best they can do. They are like in a really depth of occupied territory, and they will not be deoccupied soon. So they just trying to protect the site from being destructed.
Sure. We I took a class. I think someone listening here too, Alex, took a class on curation, and like one of the things about like you got to worry about is flooding or fires or earthquakes, and then like one of them was war. And like I kind of just shrugged that off as in like it's not going to happen here, but like watching the news, just watching stuff get back. I'm sure Chernobyl is kind of a historic site in a way now too, and it's just like there's no way to protect this. It's hard to watch, especially with people dying. But archaeological sites, it's like wow, yeah,
that's
gone.
I don't want to be like cynical, but that's the not biggest problem with Chernobyl in terms of war.
Right, right, yeah. I was trying to I don't know any big ones. I guess Carlton
from
does,
Soviet history. There's 2 sites I'm really, maybe 3. I really like said to talk about. That's the destruction of the biggest airplane in the world, called Mriya, which is the dream in Ukrainian. So it was destroyed. And second is this square on the preview, the Square of Freedom in Kharkiv, which used to be the biggest square in Europe and the great site of Soviet constructivism and Soviet architecture. This is very funny. This site has been destroyed, yeah. And the third, this is the Museum of Ukrainian artist Maria Primachenko. She has really iconic artworks, but the point is when Russian attacked this museum, there were fire in there, and people simply tried to save the pictures, the images from the fire, and managed to do this for almost all pictures, almost all artworks. That's the most iconic.
Sure. Wow.
So Chris brought up a really good point, our producer. Like, we should probably situate where Ukraine is. So I'll go ahead and share my screen just so we're all aware of what we're talking about. Except I can't share my screen, apparently, because we have too many video sources. So never mind.
Here, I can dip out. Oh, wait.
No, you're fine. Stay. So just for those who are geographically challenged, Ukraine is on the northern side of the Black Sea. It's just opposite Turkey of the Black Sea, southwest of Russia, south of Belarus, east of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. So like Eastern Europe, the breadbasket of Europe. I think it's the largest country in Europe by landmass. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like no joke. It supplies a lot of the world's grain. And so kind of from a military standpoint, the loss of Ukraine from Russia is actually a pretty big blow in terms of, and also the amount of energy you guys all produce. Like Ukraine produces a lot of natural resources, food and
just before interview, I just read the article about the neon production. Neon production is what is needed to produce the semi connectors, to produce video cards and other technological devices. So the almost all neon, like more than the half and almost 2/3 of world neon supply was provided by Ukraine, and now it's completely stopped. So if you plan to change your video card nearest days, you need to hurry up, because we apparently will have another price growing for that.
Yikes.
And we're already having problems with access to that right now. It's already
and
such
it
a
will
large
become
problem.
much further. If the war will not finish soon, it will become much further.
Excellent.
We have I was going to ask another question from Ash. She's asking, from a museum oh my gosh, why are things moving? Of course they are. From a museum archaeology standpoint, is there a concern that the artifacts and archives could be stolen and taken by Russia, like what happened in Syria?
It's much more complicated to sell the artifacts from Ukraine than artifacts from Syria because of the state of prehistory. Because they are simply not so expensive. But sure. And we just need to consider the possibility that Russians in any kind will take everything and will try to steal everything. So it's possible. And those museums who manage to provide at least some kind of evacuation of the material, they try to consider this the war crimes and trying to steal as much as possible. Some of our museums managed to do this and some didn't.
Yeah. I know, like, you took me to like all the museums you could, and that was one of my favorite experiences, and I'm pretty sure I annoyed the living hell out of you because I took a picture of every single exhibit because I was like, I don't know if I'm ever coming back here. But something that always stood out to me is that in the National Museum in Kyiv was the exhibits on the USSR and the names of all the people that died under Stalin's purges, and really kind of this narrative of like being part of the USSR was horrible. And this kind of goes back to like, this is going towards Caleb Welch's question. Thank you, Caleb. He asked, what do you think of Putin trying to justify the invasion by saying Nazis have taken over the government? He finds this especially strange considering the current president has relatives who survived the Holocaust and is currently a practicing man of the Jewish faith.
You can say it.
Well, first of all, I think we'll need another exhibition after this war. Maybe not about the USSR, but about the independent Ukraine already. The second is about this justification. I saw even the slides from Russian schools, from Russian historical lessons at schools, and there's no kind of logical sequence in any kind of this justification. First of all, because that's not the sin of Nazism in Ukraine, and no signs of this Nazism. And messages that Putin tried to apply for his self-justification is simply a lie. Like Russian language is forbidden in Ukraine. That's not true. Yeah, and like we're having a breakfast with Russian kids. That's also not true. And there's a lot of these messages that just a general narrative for Russian media. That's it, and that's no such thing as any kind of Nazi ideology. Obviously, as far as I can try to apply a logic to this, the idea that Ukraine is a nation, and you can be Ukrainian, and you don't want to be Russian if you want to be Ukrainian, might be considered as a narcissist idea by people who simply want to renovate USSR. But basically, we all know that this is not narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think sorry guys, I think that I'll lose the connection in like 5 minutes. So let's do the trick, and I'll try to enter the interview from the phone. Yeah, and we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, let's see here.
I think in the meantime, Carlton, you had Alex Crabe had asked a question about things that we can do. So he says, my fiance works at an immigration law firm and was wondering what avenues should they pursue to help refugees, and what kind of nonprofits are the best to contact. And Carlton is dropping some links down in the chat there of things that Simone had sent to us and other Ukrainian folks to help ultimately with as much as possible, as much as we can help.
Yeah, so that will be for those listening at home after the live show. That will be in the show notes itself, wherever you're listening to this episode. For everyone that's following the live stream right now, that link is now in the chat box. It's an NPR list of like 27 ways to support Ukraine, to different links, and so you can send your money to somewhere that you think is most important. So please, make sure you're able to do that. It's as we're waiting for Simon to come back, it's anthropologically, this has been a really interesting is the wrong word, but like what's happening right now has been, there's good and bad sides, like kind of saying how welcoming Europe has been to Ukrainian refugees, but then you look at how they were to Syrians. Of course, no one across the globe should have to go through this sort of event.
It just makes me think of like hunter-gatherer stuff too, because like you have, not that the men are staying and fighting and the women and children are leaving, but like just seeing the women and children walk so far across, like, it's just like humans are built to just be migratory, and it's just like jarring to see how far some of these people are like going and just like leaving, how quickly and how little things they take with them. It's sad. But like at the baseline, you just need food and water and like safety. It's hard to see.
So Julia just dropped a link to a Google sheet that has a bunch of links. Julia, do we have permission to put that on our episode description when this comes out? Because that would be super helpful.
I guess in the meantime, I had another, or I guess a response to a question. So I think, was it Caleb? We were talking about like the denazification thing. Oh,
one second, guys. So we're getting some things. If you guys can hear us, if we're frozen, will you please drop something in the chat? Let us know that you can hear us, because we are having other folks say that they can't see us and they're frozen. So we just want to make sure if that's an internet connection issue. Chris Webster, who's supposed to be running this, just saying he was having issues. So if you guys can hear us, drop a hello, how are you down there? Okay, cool.
Sweet.
Awesome. I'm still working on trying to get Simone on there. So sorry, David.
Okay, no
continue.
worries.
Are you good? Yeah, so like I've been watching this really closely because it's just like world history fascinates me. But like a lot of Americans like kind of forget that, or at least to my knowledge, that the Soviets and the Americans fought with the British against the Nazis. So like it's a deep history for them as well, that like, you know, we're all anti-Nazi here and like we got war movies about it. So are they. So it strikes a chord with the Russian public to say like, we're going to go fight Nazis, because then they're all like, hell yeah. And like the propaganda is just like, you know, essentially Saving Private Ryan to them, but they're going into Ukraine instead of Germany. And like, it seems the older generation is just like hyped on that from what I've gathered. And like the younger generation who's on Instagram is like, no, I don't know. Ola, you can probably speak more to that if, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'd be curious to hear what Simon says about that. I mean, he's not here.
And then also like a point to note, it's like when, the Nazi Panzer SS divisions were starting to go through Ukraine. Like Ukrainians had originally opened Nazi Germany with open arms because they're like, yes, the end of the Soviet Union, like we're saved. And then it was worse. It was just so much worse. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there was that point in Ukraine's history during that time where they thought they were about to be free of the USSR and Stalin. And then it was just the USSR became the lesser of two evils. And we have Simon back. And real quick, we're going to go ahead and end for those that are listening from the edited version. This is the end of segment 2. We'll be right back with Simon to continue on our conversation. And welcome back to segment 3 of episode 100. We're here with Simon. Simon, we were just kind of chatting a bit while we were waiting for you to get back on. We had another question from the audience. Morgan from Wyoming was asking, in the beginning, you mentioned that it was about a 2-week process for you to get out of Ukraine. Has this been the average timeline for people to get out of the country and have the attitudes from the countries taking refugees been positive?
And that's not like I spent 2 weeks to leave Ukraine. I spent 3 days to arrange everything in Kyiv and nearby Kyiv. Then I spent 2 days to reach Lviv. It was kind of complicated because some roads were dangerous and some roads were simply crowded, but we did it. Then I spent like a little bit more than a week to arrange everything in Lviv, and just then I tried to leave the country and cross the border with Poland. With me, it was kind of quick. I spent only 12 hours on the borderline. For some of my students who tried to do the same, it was 50 hours in the queue. So, and that's it. But as soon as you cross the border, everything is great because Europeans really try to be helpful. And in Poland, it's like extraordinary. The Ukrainian flags are everywhere, European flags, and everything is as free or cheap or clear as it is possible. So they arrange special trains to reach the safe points. They arrange special safe points. They arrange food. They arrange like everything, and it's great. And there's really a lot of help and support from Europe and from Europeans. Rather than from institutions also, but mostly from just people who try to be helpful as possible.
Gotcha. Now, I have a question for you. Like, I thought your president is not allowing Ukrainian men between 18 and 60 from leaving the country. How are you able to get across the border?
Yeah, that's true, because we have now a war state. We are in a state of war, so it's impossible to cross the border. But I'm not basically obliged to the military service unless I want to do it personally. There's different categories. We should do 3 kids or the like if you're a man who have a kid with some disruptions, or with some illness and a lot of this. And one of this category is the man whose relative died in the war with Russia since 2015. So that's why I'm not obliged to military service and can cross the border.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I believe almost every country in Europe has this formula, but European countries simply don't need this because they don't have for mobilization. No.
Yeah. There's another question here, which I think is pretty interesting. And it's in regards to memes. And like our meme culture here in the States is like very strong. And I know a lot of them are like super pro-Ukrainian, pro-Zelensky, like everything. Like, is that helpful to you guys, or is it like annoying, or?
Yeah, it's obviously helpful because there's no reason to explain. Obviously, it's helpful. That's really nice,
Sure.
and we see again this is something about support, and we also try to produce as much memes as possible. And that's also kind of information war.
Yeah.
We've seen the war like this in 21st century for the first time, and we see that, for example, Telegram or any kind of messenger is really a kind of bottleneck. So it's better to use everything we can in this format.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, kind of like coming out of this, like one of the more fascinating urban legends that's come out is the ghost of Kyiv.
Yeah.
Like especially early on, like I have a poster that's supposed to get here in a couple of days that I'm hanging on that door for the ghost of Kyiv. Like I was just, and that speaks to like how dedicated your country is to protecting its citizens and its people. Like Russia thought they were able to take Kyiv in 3 days. It's been over 2 weeks. Like they've lost so much men and equipment, and it's just been really fascinating to see how resistant Ukrainians have been to this war.
That's like, I don't want to provide any kind of interpretation to Russian troops or to Putin ideas, but from what we see, it's possible that they just expect that they will enter the city and the citizens of Kyiv will throw flowers to them or everything. Like, it will be great to be denazified. But that's not true. We have our identity and we need to protect that. And we have a lot of city legends, like a guy stood in the queue to the war office to receive his weapon and go to protect Kyiv. And he was afraid of bomb of shelling this place, but not so afraid as to lose his place in the queue. So all of these people were just forced to stay despite shelling, like something like this. And we see it like everywhere. In Lviv, the government tried to force every people who arrive in Lviv to be on to stay in the register in the war office just to calculate the men, for instance. But war officers can do this because they are overflooded with volunteers who want to serve. So really, like every Ukrainian wants to protect the country to the very end.
Yeah, instead of
for sure.
flowers being thrown at him, it's been Molotov cocktails. Like David shared a video not too long ago of some tank trying to get into Kharkiv, and like dozens of people were just like, "Get the fuck out!"
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of them already knew how to produce these cocktails because of 2014. So, in fact, the last 8 years, we had like a passive training of what to do in the war time, and our military forces were really trained by this war in the East. So now the country is really well prepared to any kind of invasion.
Gotcha.
So do you think
I found out that video's 2014, not current, but still, yeah.
Still impressive.
Yeah.
So, Simone, I was going to ask you, do you think with the advent of technology and the ease of spreading information out of Ukraine, do you think that is something that is helpful to the cause of Ukraine, or also, and is it detrimental in the same sort of way?
Sorry, can you do it once again?
Oh yeah, no. I was just gonna ask, like, so everyone has a cell phone, everyone can upload stuff to Instagram, to Twitter, to everything like that. Do you think this is something that is helping your country during this war, or is okay?
We have a lot of practices like if you notice the war column or war tank or any kind of technique, just make a photo and send the coordinates to military forces, or like send the coordinates about some diversion group. At the very beginning, the Russians put the markers for the place they intend to shell, to put the missile in, and our military officers just sent to the public in messengers the examples of these marks and told like people, if you see this, just destroy it in any way. And people did this. It is very helpful for the civilians to do their efforts.
Well, how much time do we got left, guys? 10 minutes?
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
Simon, is there anything you'd like to share with the world and let us know we can go from there?
I'm not sure. I mean that these questions we ask everything. I just want to notice, that when we arranged this, you wrote on the title that this is kind of Ukrainian crisis or something. But we all need to insist that this is war and that Ukraine is kind of standing to protect the democracy, and we are basically doing well with this. And you all guys try to visit Kyiv on the free parade when it will happen.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd love to go.
We have another question down in the comments. Do Ukrainian archaeologists have a tradition of working with Russian archaeologists? And if so, how is the war affecting that relationship?
We used to have this tradition before 2014, and after 2014 it became something like based on the low moral ground. Like we already knew by that time that Russians are claiming our land, so it's better not to work with them. We still used to have some communications, and a lot of this communication came through Europeans. Like if we work with Germans, both Ukrainians and Russians, we first work in one ocean, for instance. But now, as for any country in Europe and as for most archaeologists, Russia will not be the country, or Russians will not be scientists who intend to have some good relations with any European. I used to translate into Ukrainian a document of World Archaeological Congress last few days, a declaration that any Russian archaeologists who support this war or stay calm about this war will be considered as the assistant of the Empire of Evil or something like this. And obviously most of Russian archaeologists will support this war because just simply calling it war will be the reason to prison them up to 15 years. So most of them will do it just for reason of safety.
So where's your family now? Your mom and your grandma, Simon? So you were able to get them to Poland?
And most of my grands just refused to leave Kyiv because they already made a lot of efforts to leave Crimea, and they are not quite young really, they on their late 30s, so basically they just decided to stay nearby Kyiv in Vishnyala. This is southeastern part, so it's the more or less safe part of Kyiv, and it's cold there. I believe that they will be all right. That's it. I hope that it will stay like this. They have the car, they have food, they have some medicine. So basically, everything they needed is available right now. And if things will go good as they go now, they are safe. And I'm happy with that.
So we get a lot of news here about President Zelensky and like how he's handling things and using social media and whatnot. What do Ukrainians think about him?
First of all, that he's an artist by his first profession. Yes, so he's really good in social media, and that's nice. And he has some skill of nice speech, of nice speaking, so that's also okay. And we kind of used to think that he is not a great president in the peacetime, but for now, for this period, I say that every action of our government is correct. Everything is great, and I more or less trust them to do what they do. And this is also about the president, and you can see by any kind of tests and queries that the support of our president is growing tremendously by these 2 weeks, because indeed everything is doing like great.
Yeah.
Well, as we're about to end this, Simon, what can we do? What can our listeners do? What can our colleagues do to help you and help the people of Ukraine during this time?
I believe that you'll place these links for the support of military forces in Ukraine. I've sent you anyway, but basically that's it. We need to do this, we all, and we need to continue to support Ukraine and Ukrainians, those who left Ukraine and those who are still there. And I believe that the most important, that we need to continue to declare our position about Ukraine and Russia constantly in every kind of media, to make all governments in the world knew that we are against the war and we want Ukrainians to stop dying from the war. That's it. And in fact, there's a message. We can always ask NATO to close the sky to provide military equipment, but the specific messages maybe even it's not so important as just saying that we are against it. In person, I intend to provide as lot of financial and voluntary support as I can in Italy and then in Norway.
All right. For our audience, those that are listening live, in the comment section, I just dropped our email address. If you guys have any questions for us or Simon after the show, please feel free to email us and we'll get back to you and get you in contact with Simon or other Ukrainian archaeologists or members of the Ukrainian public that we can get you in contact with. Simon, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Like, you had just got into Italy, man. I really appreciated you coming and speaking to our audience, both for the live show and of course this is coming out in 2 weeks, not this Monday, next Monday for our audience. Dude, I miss you a lot. I can't wait to see you again. I really hope this all blows over.
Yeah, I really hope it will be soon and everything will be over, and then we definitely wait you in Ukraine, and I still would like to invent something with those countries involved. Awesome.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, guys, for giving this possibility to talk about the problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, and wish you the best.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you to all our listeners, all the people who showed up today. Thank you for showing up and, being with us for this 100th show.
Yeah. We hope to do more live shows in the future. So if you guys like this, please let us know if you'd like us to continue doing this format. Thank you all so much for coming today and supporting Simon, supporting us. We will be with you guys again. This has been episode 100 of the Life Ruins podcast. Stay safe, everyone.
Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.
Take it easy. How do I get out of here?
Connor,
I'm just making sure. I'm gonna anything else because we will definitely. All right, I'm gonna end it right now. Okay.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to A Life in Ruins podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Life in Ruins Podcast, and you can also email us at alifeinruinspodcast@gmail.com.
And remember, make sure to bring your archaeologists in from the cold and feed them beer.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.